Hello summoners and welcome back to Mobalytics, where today we have a video going over Akali, considering her current state, some meta shifts after her nerfs, and talking about her current position in the meta. For Akali, her current state is something that is very interesting. She had received some nerfs and some changes and has been in a weird spot. This champion had the single highest ban rate in all of solo queue, but also an extremely low win rate. This is in large part because she is hard to play, but also just being annoying is a big factor. Regardless of her being difficult, she probably didn't deserve to have that high of a ban rate, because in all honesty she wasn't as blatantly OP as a 70% ban rate. But annoying for sure, definitely annoying. That being said, her W got some changes. Akali's Shroud has been one of the most annoying abilities to deal with for a multitude of reasons, but now with the recent changes to it, it feels a bit more manageable. Champions with empowered auto attacks like Jax or Nasus or even ADCs were missing out on a lot of damage due to the Shroud actually cancelling auto attacks mid-flight, and now because that doesn't happen anymore, Akali can be a little bit easier to kill. Another aspect of this that was added was the shimmer when she goes back into stealth, which is a bigger deal than most would think. One of the things that was hard to deal with in lane was when Akali used to drop her shroud, you would never know if she was moving towards you or away from you, and now with the shimmer it becomes easier to position against her, while also making it that targeted abilities will have an easier time landing. And the thing is that with matchups like Ahri versus Akali, champions with non-targeted abilities as well will have an easier time landing their skill shots. So after playing Akali for quite a few games, as well as watching higher elo players play her and study her, I think that there are several options for rune pages. Firstly, the Electrocute page is standard. This is nothing new that you haven't seen before. This is TF Blade's preferred page, and I think for a good reason. This is the most damage, highest burst, and probably the best at level 6 all-ins. The Phase Rush page is actually pretty darn good as well. I would say this is the page that scales the best. I've been seeing this from Bjergsen and Rookie and the likes of other professional players giving this a go, and I do think Phase Rush scales pretty well. As far as Grasp of the Undying, if you'd like to take this one in the top lane or mid lane versus melee carries, this is also a great option. As with all champions, Grasp of the Undying is probably the best rune in laning phase, and giving you a bit of extra sustain, some extra damage, and getting you a bit tanky with the health that you get, it means that Grasp is not a bad option at all, but it's probably suited for a more off-tanky Akali build. Finally, I think that Kleptomancy is a pretty good option, allowing you to scale up, and because you do auto attack with your passive anyway, you are able to usually get off a couple of auto attacks. If you're going for Electrocute into sorcery, obviously you don't have access to the inspiration tree, but if you are able to use the inspiration path, the great thing about it is minion dematerializer for you on Akali. You really start to appreciate that extra wave clear. Moving on to some of her playstyle and gameplay patterns, I do think from an enemy perspective that the W changes are impactful and worth noting. The thing is that she still does have a strong level 2 zoning, and if you are able to hit level 2 first, just step all over them with your Q and your W. It seems pretty good to me. She does have a decent level 6 still with Electrocute. Despite all of her damage nerfs and all of her other nerfs, Akali can still one-shot you and one-rotation you if she's able to get a recall off and then kill you at level 6. As stated before, the scaling with Phase Rush, the mid to late game is absolutely bonkers on Akali. Unless you're taking Grasp, however, I do think she's still really bad early game. You need to hit level 6 to get good kill pressure, and even more realistically, you do need to hit level 9 for your increased wave clear on your Q. She definitely scales and is by definition one of the better scaling assassins, but that's also her problem in solo queue, is that unless you get obscenely fed in the early game and just find kills, it does take a while to come online. Regardless of the changes, of course Akali in high elo is still finding success and has priority for high elo players. They still seem to like her and think she's pretty darn good. For guys like TF Blade, he still puts some priority on Akali and is still doing quite well. His fighting scores are way above the 90s, and in general on his GPI, he is maxing out in many different categories. With the changes, you can actually see a small dip in his survivability, which makes sense that overall with the changes to your Shroud, you will die a bit more. It also makes perfect sense why his aggression has spiked downwards and has been in a downward trend as well, because you can't play as over aggressive and think that you get a jail out of free card every single time you use W. That also makes sense why that happens. Overall, he has been able to keep his farming, his vision, and his objectives still through the roof, and because of that you can understand why he is still putting priority on high elo Akali success. That being said, I do think given enough time, and if you are able to put in the time, I think Akali can conclude into B tier, even for normal elo. For high elo, I could see her being A or S, but just talking about normal elo, I think B tier for mid lane is appropriate. The new phase rush setup actually gives you a reason to pick her up again and say, hey, if I didn't like Akali before or was struggling with her recently, maybe try out this new page. She can still be hard to gank, and of course, if she's able to get items and snowball, she scales incredibly well. One thing about her W as well is she actually has a minutes or time scaling on the ability, and as far as I know, that's the only ability in League of Legends that does that, so given enough time and items, she will become oppressive in the late game. Of course, there are serious cons, however, and honestly with these cons, maybe she shouldn't even be on the tier list. She is a high skill cap and learning curve champion, meaning that you really need to put in a lot of time and know what you're doing on her to make her B or A tier. She is banned all the time, so even if you know how to play her, it's likely that you won't even be able to get your hands on her. And then of course, number 3, arguably being the most important, that even if you put 50 to 100 games on Akali and feel comfortable on her, it's likely that in the future she will be nerfed again or even changed. So we'll have to see. I think for a tier list for climbing, it's very hard to recommend Akali, but if you are able to snowball, she is still quite a good champion and has high elo success, so that's why I've put her as B tier. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on Akali. I'm curious what your thoughts are on her as well, and we look at every single comment, so make sure you let us know in the comment section down below and use the product at mobalytics.gg.